Shall we get started? Adam, am I live now?
Yes, go ahead, Jinghan, you're live.
Okay. All right. So hello, everyone. Sorry that we are facing a little bit of tech difficulties. Professor Wang is based in China, and we are running this platform through Teams in the UK. So we are facing some technical difficulties. So sorry for the delay. Welcome to participate in this Lancaster University Confucius Institute and China Center joint seminar. I am Jinghan Zeng. I'm the director of the Confucius Institute. I am very delighted to welcome Professor Wang Zhengxu to be our speaker for today's seminar. Wang Zhengxu is a distinguished professor at Department of Politics at Fudan University. Previously, he served as acting director and senior research fellow at the China Policy Institute, University of Nottingham, and he lived in the UK for 8 years. Professor Wang received his PhD in political science from University of Michigan in 2005, and his current research projects include the democratic values of Chinese citizens, institutional changes, and political reforms in China's political system, and the politics of governance in China. He has published widely on socio-economic modernization, value changes, democratization, governance challenges, and leadership and elite politics in China and East Asia. He has published, his publication appears in Governance, International Review of Social Knowledge, Political Research Quarterly, Japanese Journal of Political Science, Contemporary Politics, Asian Journal of Public Opinion Research, the China Quarterly, the China Journal, Journal of Contemporary China, among others. So we are very delighted to have Professor Wang Zhengxu today. Before I give the floor to Professor Wang, I'd like to mention a few policies regarding today's seminar. First of all, this seminar will be recorded, and attendees will not be able to, attendees cannot be seen or heard on the recording, only the presenter. And attendees shouldn't be able to broadcast. But just in case, please ensure that your cameras and microphones are switched off. And we will have a Q&A session after Professor Wang's talk. Please feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A section at any time, and you can choose to pose a question anonymously. So we are going to have about 40 to 50 minutes for the talk from Professor Wang, and then we will run into the Q&A session. The Q&A session will be moderated by me. I will select questions for Professor Wang to answer, just in case there are similar questions. And if you are having technical issues, please make a post in the Q&A session as well, and our moderator can respond to you privately. So that's all. I'd like to pass the floor to Professor Wang. Professor Wang, now the floor is yours.
All right, the topic today is China's political system, and regarding how the political system will respond to giant crisis. So I have this title page, which have two pictures where you often see on TV when he reports the Chinese politics. And what I will cover today is, first I will give an overview of China's political system, and I try to compare this political system with the what normally people take as liberal democracy, UK being one typical example, and the United States actually will be the elephant in the room during my talk. So, in the second part, I will give some more details about the organizational and operational setup of the Chinese political system. Those, this at the organizational level, students of Chinese politics will know more. They have normally, if you have taken a class of Chinese politics, you understand this quite well. But what I will try to emphasize today is to understand Chinese political system. The organizational part is less important. And then thirdly, I will talk about how this system will respond generally to a crisis, to a giant crisis. And then I will go to more details regarding how the COVID-19 case from 2019, end of 2019 to 2020, how this case can show that the Chinese system responds to a giant crisis. And then I will conclude. Okay. Yes. So I have studied political science, and I have studied how the Chinese political system, and tried to understand the Western political system for many years. And I have come to this conclusion that to understand a political system, it is utterly insufficient to start by talking about election or parties and so on. I see those as the operational part of a political system. I think to understand a functioning, a stable political system, we have to start from the ideational level. I think the political institutions, there are two kinds, two very broad kinds of institutions. And the first kind is I call it ideational institution. And it is about the values, the fundamental beliefs, or you can say the fundamental ideological beliefs of the polity. And you can call this the legitimization, the values or the beliefs that define the political system or the polity. And some also you can call them the constitutional rules or constitutional beliefs. And in traditional China, Confucianism, for example, is a kind of this belief system that define China's polity. And then in the ideational area, they are also less. They are also less fundamental, but more concrete. Please excuse me just one moment. All right, I'm back now. So the idea, the fundamental ideas and fundamental rules, political rules or principles, these make up the ideational components of a political system. And the other group of institutions, I call it the operational component, and those are really the institutions that organize political activities and political actions. And here are what people are more familiar with, the institutions that people are more familiar with, and they are the elections, Congress, Parliament. So these are electoral, representational, or various. These institutions serve the various functions, political functions, how a polity express the citizens' voices, and how a polity aggregate people's preferences and so on, and how a political system make decisions, implementing policies, implementing decisions, and so on. And this, to me, are the narrow sense of the political system, or the people call the government or the governance system. And also below there is a more technical level. Those institutions, they are really just techniques: how to collect information, how to pay taxes, how to police the for public security and so on. So and this, you don't see difference across countries. This very technical arrangements, they can apply to every country. They are part of the administrative system, so they are less important. But they also belong to the organizational or operational levels. So so for me to understand Chinese political system and to understand why it works so differently compared to the UK system or the American system, is to first separate the political system into two levels: the ideational level and the operational level. Okay, please, next slide. So to illustrate what I mean by the ideational level, I think the delay is getting shorter. That's good. The ideational, what do we mean by ideational levels of institutions? For example, what is generally believed to be a liberal democracy. For liberal democracy, the ideational level, the legitimization rules are quite simple. They are, the idea is democracy is the government of the people, or government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's the fundamental belief. And it comes to some general rules or political rules. In liberal democracy, it's about civil rights and liberties. It's about accountability, accountable government. It's about representation. It's about transparency of government. It's about clean government. It's about limited government. It's about rule of law, and so on. So, a liberal democracy strives to achieve these purposes for politics. How we achieve these goals, here we come to the operational. Representation is achieved through elections. Accountable government is through, election and letting the government accountable to the parliament, answerable to the parliament, and so on. And rule of law is to ensure the court is independent of the government, and so on. And transparency, clean government. There's a belief that free media will play a check, will play a check against the government, and so on. So, what defines a liberal democracy is actually it's not the operational rules, operational institutions. It's really the political principles that liberal democracy is about: civil rights, about accountability, about transparency, about clean government, and so on. Yes, please, next slide. Okay. Liberal democracy is great. All those ideas, all those principles are great and important. But there are so many other rules or principles that are important for politics, but that are not what liberal democracy is about. So there are so many things that liberal democracy does not talk about, does not emphasize. And for example, liberal democracy does not talk about state capacity. Liberal democracy is always concerned about people's right, about having the government being accountable to the people, and so on. is very unconcerned about state capacity. It's not concerned. It's not the fundamental concern of unity of the political community. It's about emphasizing members or groups of the political community will actually compete among themselves for power or for representation. And liberal democracy is not about social economic development. Liberal democracy does not talk about state responsibility. It does not talk about moral strength, moral virtue of government officials. He believes the government officials are, their quality are judged by election. There are no intrinsic requirement for a public official. All public officials are not subject to a higher level of moral standard. And that's like, if you live in China, that's different. Chinese officials are supposed to be morally more upright, are supposed to be holding higher virtue. Okay, and then liberal democracy is not about meritocracy. He only believes in election. He doesn't believe in selecting leaders from their past performance and their records. He emphasized the role of people making the choice, not a system to carefully assess government officials' quality. And liberal, I can go on, but just to save time, we can move to the next slide. The point is, there are so many things that are important for politics, but liberal democracy is not part of a liberal democracy formula. Yes, next slide, please. Okay, in comparison, or not in just to, because I have explained that to understand a political system, you have to start, or at least you have to include the ideational components of the political system. So now let's talk about what the ideational components are for the Chinese political system. The political system can be, just for shorthand, just call it a socialist people's republic. And in terms of the ideational beliefs, ideational part, there are very strong socialist components. And socialist ideas in this country means unity of the people, common welfare, strong state, and very heavy state responsibilities. The state is responsible for people's welfare, is responsible for the environment, is responsible for public health, and so on. And that's a socialist idea. At least that's how people in this country understand socialism. And second, there are very strong democracy or democratic ideas or ideals. Support or accept people's sovereignty, that the country belongs to the people. And it also has this very strong traditional called people rootedness beliefs. And it comes from the Confucian Minben idea of Minben, meaning people are the roots of the nation, of the country. And this also comes from the Confucianist tradition of meritocracy. Meritocracy, I put here under democracy, meaning in this meritocracy system, the path to leadership roles are open to everyone. Any commoner, any people from average family can move up to leadership roles, to government leaders positions by performance, by excelling yourself in academic, in universities, then by by performing well in government services. So I see this. I see a very strong democratic element in this, meaning power is open to commoners. And then the democracy idea is also linked to the minben, that people being the roots and foundation of the country. The belief that government is of the people, government is from the people, and government always function in the people, for the people. Western observers often say China is not a democracy because there's no election of the national leaders, but the design of this system always emphasize the purposes of government is for the people, and government is of the people because members of the government, they are part of the people. And then there are very strong republicanism ideas. Just for time purpose, we skip this. And the purpose of this slide is to say the Chinese political system, there are very important ideational elements that people outside China overlook when they try to understand Chinese political system. Yes, next slide, please, Adam. Okay. So, and there are more ideational objectives for Chinese political system. One is it is very concerned, very focused on improving the capacity of the state, so it can serve the people. It can deliver, and the state shoulder a very heavy responsibility for solving social, economic, and political problems, and it emphasizes the unity of the political community. It emphasizes socio-economic development in order for the welfare, for improving people's living standard, for prosperity of people's life, and so on. And it emphasizes leadership party, meaning the political party is there. One, it should count. The members of the party must be in terms of talent and quality, must be those of above average level of the people, and they should be the people who are public-minded, who are willing to shoulder public services duties. And so this, in terms of the special definition of the party, one, it comes from the Marxist-Leninism as a revolutionary party and a vanguard party. The other is that it comes from the Confucian tradition that the people of the higher caliber and higher virtue should form a group of officials or political elites that shoulder the responsibility of governing the country. And then this is very important. The Chinese tradition does not separate the state from the society. It always believes the state and the society are always integrated. And actually, in the Chinese vocabulary, those words, those terms, state, country, society, and nation, they are the same. They are the same words, meaning, it's in this country we don't see people confronting the state. We see the state as of the people, and the people are with the state. So the society and state divide is unreal in this country. Always, when the country faces a challenge, it's always the issue of how the government and the people work together to deal with the problem. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, yeah. Actually, by this point, I can move quite fast because in terms of the operational institutions in China, people know this better. Like there is the party officially called the Communist Party of China, And this is the most important political, the organizational institution. And okay, let's move to the next slide. Yeah, and then there is a Congress. There is there's an official constitution. So all the political units, political agencies, the Congress, the party, the government, the state council, which is the cabinet, and the provinces, all this work within a constitutional framework, which is called a people's democratic dictatorship. This term is quite old, but just you can afford to not bother with those terms. But the point is, they are a set of different operational institutions that are functioning to implement the ideational values, what I was trying to explain earlier. Okay, let's move forward to the next slide. Okay, so this, if we have time today, we can talk more about this. Different places in China's capital, different buildings that represent the various political institutions, either the People's Congress or the just the national capital and so on. So let's move forward. Yes, maybe we move forward by 3 or 4 slides. Yeah. Okay. I'll talk briefly here. The point is, in China, it's unlike in UK, where you have England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. In China, you have a provincial system, and the local government, the provincial government, is any government agency is subject to 2 lines of control. This is generally called a line and block governance design, meaning every government agency is subject to both the control of the central government and the control of your local government. So this way, the local agency, on the one hand, is responsible to deal with the local issue, local governance, but on the other hand, it is also responsible to be part of the national government effort. So it is always integrated by the national government. Okay, now we can move to the next slide. Okay, yeah, so this slide shows the regional setup. China is a very vast territorially. It's a very vast country. Territorially is separated or is organized into more than 30 units, 32 provincial units, and then plus 2 mini Hong Kong and Macau. And then under the province, there are municipal or prefectural level units, and then under that there are county units and then township units. The point here is there is a very comprehensive local government system, and every local government system, like I said earlier, is one, you are responsible to manage your own territory or your own regional issues, but you are also integrated into the national system. And the relationship between the regional, the local government, and the national or the upper level government is when there are directories from the upper level government, you have to respond. But at the same time, if you fail, if your capacity cannot match the local challenge, you always have the upper level government to fall back upon. So this system is well integrated. So the local government is part of the national government, national system. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when there is a crisis, how does the system respond? One, we have to know, most of the time, almost always, a crisis will emerge locally, and it's the local government that will first be responsible to deal with the crisis management. But whether the local government can successfully deal with the crisis depends on many things. Depends on one, how severe the crisis is, and two, how capable, and the local capacity, how capable is the local government in terms of its resources, in terms of its skills, in terms of many other elements. And we know a lot of time the local crisis, they are successfully managed locally, so they never got out of control in the local place, and the upper level government has never had to intervene, had to come to help. But if the local crisis escalate, if it becomes too serious, and the local government cannot contain the crisis, in this point, the upper level government will come into play. And if you have the upper level government if you have started the upper level government, it can bring in more resources. It can commit more resources to deal with the local crisis, and this can keep going all the way up. So if a county government fail to deal with the issue locally, the prefecture government will come in, and if at that level the local government, the prefectural government still fail to be strong enough, to be capable enough, and the provincial government will come in, and so on. Now, yes, thank you, Adam. You have turned the slide ahead of me. That's very good. When in my title, I use the term giant. What is considered a giant crisis? When a crisis or when an event is big enough that the national government has to come in directly, I call it a giant happening. So this includes some of the events, some giant events like Olympics, like 2010 World Expo, and there are some very big projects, construction projects or social projects. The Three Gorges Dam project was a national project. And then in the last few years, there's this poverty alleviation social project. If you, in my classes, I always use this as an example how the Chinese government function. And then the large disasters, when you have a huge flood, when you have a huge, very devastating earthquake, these are giant events. The national government directly come into play. Yes, next. So when the situation becomes a giant crisis, the central government under the party, actually it's the party center, directly leads the response. Either the party, the president, or the president is always the party secretary. Either he will directly lead the effort, or a very top leader will be directly responsible. And there's always a national leader on site. So if there's a big earthquake, let's say in today's Scotland, using China's example, a vice premier or vice prime minister will be at Scotland throughout until the situation stabilizes. It may take 1 week, it may take 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a few months. In such a situation, a very top level national leader will be on site. And when the central government is committed into this, it can take very forceful measures, such as mobilizing or involving the troops, the military troops, constructing very rapidly constructing facilities. You can ask other provinces to come in to supply materials, to supply personnel, staffs, and so on. It can mobilize and coordinate many sectors in terms of, say, such as food supply, such as manufacturing, such as medical sectors, and so on. And the social groups, social forces also join in, including media. How do we manage the information? How do we disseminate the information, and so on? To ensure a healthy discussion, to avoid radicalizing the issues, and so on. That will divide the people, divide the society, and so on. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Now, this is an example of a large flood in 1998. Here you can see the president at that time in this boat. He's the one wearing a pair of glasses in the white shirt. He was the president and party secretary. So he was this is thousands of miles, more than 1,000 miles away from Beijing in central China. And if this happened in the United States, then George Bush will not be there, or he may take a look from his helicopter and left. But the Chinese leaders, they are real on site, and this the lower right, this person speaking to the megaphone. He was the premier, so he was basically the prime minister, and he was on the bank for many days with the flood fighting people. And a lot of these are soldiers, military soldiers. Yes, next slide. We can move to the next one. Yeah, and that's the a very devastating earthquake in 2008. And it's the same story that the state can mobilize troops in and building roads and so on, and the leaders are on site for weeks. Okay, next.
Professor Wang, is it okay if we finish your talk in 15 minutes and then we can go to the Q&A?
COVID-19.
15 minutes.
This was how. Oh no, yeah, COVID-19. Yeah, this was how things happened. And by now we still don't know how the virus got started when it was first emerged. But the cases, people's sick cases start to emerge around mid-December. By mid-January, the central government, there was a lot of exams, and there was the local government. I think eventually the local government failed to control it early enough, and the central government realized, okay, it has gotten quite big in Wuhan, and the central government now has to come in directly. And it needs other provinces, it needs other sectors to coordinate. So January 17, around January 17, it was decided that there will be a lockdown of the whole city of Wuhan, a huge city, and people will not be allowed to travel. And it was just before the Chinese New Year. But the government can mobilize, can stop the trains, can stop the airlines, and so on. And then the other provinces will also take similar, well, not similar, but relevant actions to ensure, if there are cases in their local provinces, they will be quarantined and so on. And then actually for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we all stay home most of the time, outside Wuhan. And the government, once the central government come in, it can commit large amount of financial resources. This will be used to build hospitals, to pay for extra supplies, and so on. And then troops will be mobilized, and medical teams from other provinces will come in. So this includes some example. Here the slides are turning, that the government can quickly mobilize the capacities to build new hospitals, to set up clinical facilities, and so on. And medical teams are mobilized from other provinces, including a lot of them from Shanghai, from my university's 2 major hospitals, and so on. I have all my friends. I have so many friends in the medical sector, and I know every hospital are across the whole country are mobilized, either to deal with the cases locally or either send teams to Wuhan to support the Wuhan situation. So eventually you need a nationally coordinated response. Every provinces will need to take actions, and to ensure many people stay home. Then you need to, for example, you need to compensate the restaurant or other entertainment business. For example, if you shut down movie theaters, you need financial resources to subsidize them so that they can survive through the epidemic. And you need to have enough medical supplies. You need to have enough food, life supplies, and deliver them to the people who need those. And if you decide the school has to go online, you need to ensure you develop online courses on time, that every household is able to put a student to study online, and so on. And you also need to manage imported cases. So you need a very strong border control effort. We have students who work in the Shanghai in the international airport, so I know how every detailed part of the work has to be well planned, well coordinated, and so on. And then by mid-March, the country can reopen business step by step. And then here you need to ensure, when you start to reopen some of the businesses, how do you ensure that you mitigate, you limit the risk of the virus spreading? What are the measures to ensure things will not go badly again? Okay, next, please. Yeah, these are just some of the photos that how things were being done at those times. And I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about this Fangtang Shelter Hospital. Yes, maybe we stay at this slide for a few minutes for a while. I think will eventually, at least will eventually make the Wuhan case successful was this Fangchang hospital system. Basically, by late January, mid-January, there are many people infected in Wuhan, and there were no enough hospital capacities. So the national team of experts, they recommend to set up this Fangchang shelter hospital, or someone translate as mobile cabin hospital. You can use stadiums, exhibition halls to set up a large number of beds to admit those people who are infected. Most people who are infected, they have light symptoms. They can recover if they are given just very light medical support, medical intervention. But if they are not admitted into a kind of hospital, then they will spread to other people. So you have to keep them. You have to collect them, admit them into a kind of hospital or a facility, separate facility, and so Fangchang hospital can serve this purpose. And this Fangchang hospital, the medical staffing and medical requirements are quite light. So you don't need a full hospital capacity. You just need to have enough beds, and they are given good rest, and they are kept safe, and then most of them will recover. But you also need large number of these seats. So you need to build Fangchang hospital. You need to build many Fangchang hospitals and have many beds. So next slide, we will see. Yes, next slide, we will see. During that time, very quickly, there were tens of thousands of these Fangchang beds are set up. Yeah, so this is a technical illustration of how to turn a public facility, a stadium, into a Fangchang hospital. Okay, next. Basically, you need large number of beds, massive scale, but quite light, quite basic medical care. And if for people who are admitted to Fangchang hospital, they will, if they turned into severe cases, they will be referred to the proper hospitals. So here in Wuhan, in a few days' time, they set up tens of thousands of Fangchang hospital beds across the city. The city is the size of London. Yeah. So this chart can show that how the Fangchang hospital changed the whole thing. Here, the blue bars are people who are admitted into Fangchang hospitals. So starting from February the 6th, the first Fangchang hospital opened, and the light blue are those who are admitted into hospital, and the dark blue are the available beds. So at the first, until February 24 or so, the number of beds keep increasing, and they keep admitting patients into this Fangchang hospital. And then the red, the deep red part are those who are recover and who are discharged. And the light blue, light yellow, or light orange figures are those who turned into severe cases, and they were referred to the proper hospitals. So you can see just from February the 6th through late February. By February 18th, there have been enough beds for everyone to admit everyone, and gradually people recover after February 10th or so. There are people who left after February 16th. So just about 10 days, people start to leave. They fully recovered. Stay with the last slide a little bit. But anyway, or maybe not. The point, yeah, I can share this PowerPoint later on for people. So yeah, let's talk about this last slide, conclusions. I hope the point is conveyed that one, when we look at different political systems, it's very important we first try to understand the ideational components of the political system. And to be fair, I think many people, when they think about the Chinese political system, they overlook the ideational components. They only think, no, China has only one party. It doesn't have a national election. They only look at these operational elements of the political system, and then they come to the conclusion that, oh, then it is not a democracy. It is a very oppressive and non-representative government, and I think that's completely misguided. And then in terms of the operational, there's a national government and there's a party that try to integrate everything. So the operational design tries to combine both the national and local rigors. Local government are responsible to deal with local issue, but they are always part of the national picture. And the national government always ensure that local government can deal with their local issue. And if they cannot, the upper government has the chance to come in. And when there's a giant crisis, the national government is indispensable. It has to take up the responsibility and uses its power and authority and capacity to mobilize across the provinces, across the sectors, so that the crisis can be dealt with. Okay, I will stop here. Sorry for the technical problems. Somehow we managed, and I've seen questions coming up. So I will turn back to Professor Zeng and see, and I will let him to direct questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Professor Wang Zhengxu. I find this presentation really interesting, and this is a quite important and timely topic. Obviously, I think given the development of the pandemic and different kind of policies and systems have been dealing with the pandemic, leading to quite different outcomes, I can imagine this will be a very hot topic in the next few years. So thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. We have a few questions, do we? Yeah, so I'd like to encourage the audience, if you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A session, and Professor Wang will be able to answer it. But before we go to the questions from the audience, I'd like to use the privilege of the chair to ask two questions to Professor Wang. The first question is, In your conclusion section, you mentioned that ideational parts of the system is often being overlooked, which I cannot agree more. And I think the bit of, can you explain a bit more how this ideational kind of values or ideology play a role in different political systems' response to the pandemic? For example, in China and in the UK and in the US. I think in some part of it, you specifically mentioned about the capacity, and I think that's currently what a lot of analysis is looking at, is a different capacity in terms of mass mobilization. You cannot see the same kind of mass mobilization in the UK. The police sector in the UK, for example, often say that they can't handle quite a lot of things happening in the pandemic because of the budget, because of their personnel. But in China, it's a very different story. So I think the capacity bit is clear. But how about ideational factors? How does this play a role? And my second question is running through the presentation. Is you started with a discussion about trying to the characteristics of the political system, and I think to a lot of Chinese scholars, they often argue that political reforms in China has often been overlooked as well. And I wonder, now China has entered a so-called new era, and is there any development of the political system from what you just mentioned at the very beginning in this new era, or the future direction of travel? If you can briefly elaborate some of that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Zeng. In terms of the ideational component, I think the very important difference, say, between China and the United States, like I said, being a liberal democracy, there's always a very strong belief of civil liberty and individual rights. And that way, citizens can legitimately reject government directions. And that's very different in China. In China, because and I say this, because there's always a strong belief in government and the people always integrated. So there's really a synergy between the state and the people. So when the state says that, oh, this is a very bad epidemic, that to deal with it, we have to, a lot of us have to stay home. And then people really comply. People say, yes, that's the right thing to do. So this, some people say this is the trust between people and the government in China. But what I say is really the general belief between the people and the government. There's no antagonism. There's no confrontation. It's always the belief that the state and the people are together and always work together. Then, of course, technically, the state also ensure there are enough people, volunteers, also neighborhood community workers, that they will always not watching, but at least always to ensure, people really complying. So your neighborhood people will discuss, the neighborhood workers, they will devise some rules. Because now everybody has to stay home. Then every household can have one person each day to go out for grocery shopping. So we will have a ticket system for each household. So basically, what I'm saying is, both at the ideational level, that people are willing to comply, and at the operational level, the government also has the support of people to have the local agents to manage the situation. So you use the ticket, each household use one ticket every day to go out of your neighborhood to shop, to the shop. And your second question is about political reform, and you ask about the new era. What I see is not much change in the ideational component. The party and the political system still stay with the what I collectively call the socialist the people's republic ideas. What is changing is really at the operational level, how the party now organizationally try to make the system works better, make the system to be more effective. Thank you, Professor Zeng, for the two questions.
Thank you very much, Zhengxu, regarding this. So I'd like now to open the floor to the audience. Let me, sorry, I'm still trying to familiar with the system. Okay, so we got the question is that, do you agree that China's political system is materialist in terms of each person's development? Are there forms of state-sanctioned spiritual development?
No, I don't agree. I think no, I don't think that's true. I think Chinese people are very intellectual, very spiritual, although not very religious. This is not a religious country. Although religion is free, you are free to worship, but religion is not very widely practiced. But there are, there are a spiritual dimension for people's life in terms of culture, literature. So this is definitely not a country of people just pursuing materialist development. Yeah, I wait for the next question.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. So the next questions, if you can say it, I will only say it once. Many have questioned the legitimacy of the case number coming out of China. It's hardly believed that there were less than 100,000 reported cases, since the cases would explode during the mass migration of Chinese New Year of 2020. Are those numbers accurate? Do you have any comments?
Yes, I think those are accurate. You should put this into the real context. Although China is large in terms of whole population, it's a country of 1.4 billion. But actually, what really happened was just in Wuhan, which is a city of 20 million. And it was early enough, the lockdown of the Wuhan city was early enough. So it didn't quite, other provinces didn't quite get any outbreak. They are just, I think in a few provinces, you get cases to more than a few hundred cases. In some provinces, they were just, all these were exported from Wuhan to these provinces before the lockdown. So some provinces got a few dozen, or just slightly over 100, and I think there were 2 or 3 provinces that got into 300 or 400, 500 cases, or more than 1,000. But so overall, things in every province other than Wuhan, Hubei province, in every other province by late February, it was all cleared, and Wuhan got 0 case by late March. So eventually, that was the figure came out of the situation.
Thank you, Zhengxu. I think given that there is a delay and we are basically, I think we have to wrapping this up in about 15 minutes. I think what's the best is, given that you can also see the questions here, maybe you can answer all the questions. Just pick the questions that you would like to answer. You can repeat the question first and then put your answer instead of I doing it, which will cause another 30 seconds delayed. So maybe you can pick up, I think we have about 5 more questions. Maybe you can pick all those you feel comfortable to answer, and we can just do it once for all, and then we close today's talk. Does that sound okay to you?
Okay. Yes, I think that's a good idea. So the question by Richard is how the different way democratic values are interpreted in China and the United States. Oh, I think that more or less that was what Professor Jin's question earlier, Professor Zeng's question earlier. So one thing is in the United States, people tend to defy the government and tend to distrust the government. So even the government say, oh, this is a very bad epidemic, you should stay home, then people just defy. And Richard, the second question is the compliance in China and the implementation. What are the means by which the parties are accountable to the people for its action? I don't quite understand whether you are talking about these responses to this COVID-19 or in general. But let me say, in general, and I think that's also where the Chinese political system are often misunderstood. Is the party is always the party has to be responsive to the people. The party takes very close reading of people's mood. Because the party is so integrated, so intertwined with people, so the party can understand what the people want, and what will make people unhappy. So the party is accountable this way and is responsive this way. And this people, if you really want to study the Chinese political system, you come to do some field work, and you will understand how day in, day out, how the party is always intertwined with the people. And that way you understand what is the right thing, what is the popular thing to do, what is the what will drive people angry. Iran, what would be the most challenging problem when it comes to research in Chinese political system? I think the most challenging one is to balance. Okay, you have a kind of general Western reading of the Chinese political system, and you have the party's official definition, official description of how it works. You have to come into middle. You have to challenge one account with the other, and you have to come up with more balanced, more how do I say, more measured understanding. Leonard, I would love to know why the Chinese government bans some of Western media, such as YouTube. Yeah, I think information management is now becomes a global issue in the United States. You also see Twitter banning some people. So in general, I think it's the same principle. You might say there are different degrees. I think is debatable, but I think the party believes it is legitimate, for public good, for order, for healthy social debate. Some information should be limited. Chris Hart, ethnical. I think you mean ethnical harmony. Does not really seem like what happens to the Uyghurs. Yeah. To be very simple, I think the international media, and I always get this question, and many people always get this question. The Western media's portray of Xinjiang and Xizang is completely, I think, off. And this is driven by a lot of bias, a lot of bias and a lot of exaggeration and a lot of imagination. So, I mean, there's no, I think probably there's no other issue about China that is so misunderstood. So there, basically, because there's no time today, I will just stop here for this.
Thank you very much, Zhengxu. And because of time, I think if there's no more questions, I'd like to close off. Yeah, we're already on an hour and 40 minutes. So I'd like to close off this talk. I'd like to thank everyone, especially all the audience, for your patience today and for all your questions. And special thanks goes to Adam as well. I know it wasn't very easy to connect from WeChat to your phone and from two teams, and then to everyone. So thank you, Adam and Colette, for helping with this, to making this tech work. And most importantly, I'd like to thank Professor Wang Zhengxu for your time and for sharing your research with us, which is very interesting, and you have been handling very well regarding all the questions. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. And when the pandemic is over, I'd like to invite you to come to visit us in Lancaster. And you are always welcome to come to visit us, and perhaps to share more of your research with us in our future seminar series. So brilliant. So thank you everyone, and this is it. Thank you.